The first scenes show Teppei practicing swordsmanship. His mother is preparing food and asks Teppei to help her. Teppei goes to help his mother and meets his father along the way. His father starts playing around with Teppei, hitting him with a stick. His mother throws a ladle at his father, saying they're like little children. After Teppei, his mother and father sit down to eat. The news again announces that some businessman has been killed. His father asks Teppei what he would do if something like that happened to him. "I'll think of something," Teppei replies with a smile. Teppei asks his father the same question. "I'll think of something." Teppei remembers he's late and runs out the door. Teppei's mother scolds him for taking his scooter to school again. "Who does he take after?" "Of course he takes after his mother," replies his father. Teppei explains that that was the last time he saw his parents. We then see Teppei standing at his parents' grave. Teppei decides to go to his uncle Isshin. Teppei doesn't understand why his parents hid his origins. We then see a carriage with a very beautiful girl riding in it. Some criminals are following her. Teppei doesn't know what to do. Teppei decides to help the girl and runs to his scooter. We see the girl's carriage, driven by a man with glasses. The man says that for now he has nothing to worry about with her. Teppei drives dangerously along a cliff and approaches the carriage. One of the criminals hits the carriage, breaking the window. "Get out already," says the criminal and hits again. "What a beauty," says the criminal, seeing the girl. Teppei drives up and says his line, "I'll think of something." One of the criminals hits Teppei, but he manages to dodge it. Teppei gets on his scooter and jumps onto the criminal's car. The girl tells the man with glasses to help Teppei. The man with glasses rams the carriage into the criminal's car. One of the criminals starts shooting at the carriage. The criminal points his gun at Teppei. The man with glasses hits the criminal, saving Teppei. A wheel falls off the carriage, and the girl is left hanging on the carriage. Teppei jumps from the car to the carriage, trying to save the girl. The girl calls out to the man for help, suddenly falls, and Teppei catches her. The girl looks at Teppei in surprise. Suddenly, the carriage breaks down, and Teppei and the girl fall. Teppei and the beautiful girl fall straight into the trees. A man with glasses sat down next to the criminal and pointed a gun at him. The man grabbed the gun and broke it. The man tells the criminal that he will pay for this in full. Then we see the girl and Teppei lying on the grass. Teppei says he's alive thanks to the branches that cushioned his fall. His hand accidentally landed on the girl's large breast. The girl came to and greeted Teppei. The girl asks where we are and what we're doing here. The girl says her name is Charlotte Heiserlink. Teppei says she has a name like some princess. "I am a princess," Charlotte replies. The girl also reproaches Teppei for touching her breast. "Do guys really like big breasts that much?" Charlotte asks. Teppei replies that it's a matter of personal taste. Later, we see Charlotte and Teppei walking down the road. Charlotte says she has to go, otherwise she might get scolded. Charlotte kisses Teppei and thanks him for saving her. Teppei watches in shock as Charlotte drives away. Teppei sees 14 missed calls on his phone, gets in, and drives away. Next, we see Isshin's maid calling Teppei. Isshin is unhappy that Teppei is keeping him waiting. We see Teppei, who says he was invited by Arima Isshin. Teppei tries to pass and is detained by guards. Isshin appears, saying that this is his precious guest. Isshin calls Teppei to come to him. Teppei apologizes to Uncle Isshin for being late. Teppei says he wants to call him Grandpa, and Isshin agrees. He asks about his father and mother's accident, saying it wasn't an accident. Isshin says that revenge won't achieve anything anyway. "Revenge is a vicious circle of suffering and grief," says Isshin. Isshin says, "Koni and your father wouldn't approve of your choice." The maid tells Teppei to change his clothes because dinner is coming up. Teppei says he saved someone, which is why he looks like that. Isshin tells Teppei to go ahead, as he acted honorably. We then see a beautiful evening with many guests. Isshin greets the corporation's executives and the other guests. He introduces Arima Teppei as his heir and son. Isshin says that on the way here, Teppei saved a man's life. Isshin asks Teppei whom he saved. "Charlotte Heiserlink," he replies. Isshin praises Teppei and tells him to go change. Later, Teppei tells Isshin that his goal is to find the culprit. Isshin says this performance is to find the culprit. "Kano was the true heir," says Isshin. Isshin tells Teppei to find loyal allies. Later, we see Teppei talking with one of the guests. The other guests also want to meet Teppei. Teppei realizes that his parents' killer is hiding among the guests. Mr. Van Hosen asks the guests to steal Teppei away for a moment. Van Hosen says they're simply trying to get closer to Isshin. The man introduces himself to Teppei as Vincent Van Hosen. Vincent also introduces his young daughter to Teppei. Pleased to introduce myself, Maria Van Hosen, the girl says. Vincent asks, where is Silvia now? Maria replies, gone somewhere. Vincent tells Teppei that he'll soon get used to it all and leaves. Later, a maid gives Teppei some water to drink, and he thanks her. Teppei is surprised to see a real maid in front of him. He notices someone practicing swordsmanship outside through the window. Teppei quickly runs outside to stretch his legs. We see a very beautiful girl practicing swordsmanship. Teppei arrives and compliments the girl, saying he wanted to try fencing. The girl is enraged by such impudence and attacks him. Teppei and the beautiful girl fight equally. The girl smiles at Teppei. That's enough, says Isshin Arima. They're suitable, right? Says Vincent, the girl's father. Isshin says Teppei has simplified things greatly, and the girl blushes. She's Silvia Van Hosen. Isshin introduces the girl. Isshin says that Teppei and Silvia Van Hosen are engaged. We then see Charlotte Heiserlink holding a cat. It's night, and we see a limousine driving along the highway. Inside are Teppei, Yu the maid, and Isshin. Teppei, exhausted, collapses onto the maid's chest. Isshin asks Yu if becoming a maid bothers her. Yu the maid replies no, for which she is extremely grateful to Isshin. Isshin says he's troubled by guilt over his mistreatment of Silvia. Yu says we're not free to choose our surroundings. How to live with them, what to do with our lives, Yu replies. That's not an answer, Isshin replies. However, he says he was touched by Yu's words about his surroundings. Isshin says he'll see what choice Teppei makes. Later, we see the gates open and Teppei wake up. Teppei gets out of the car and sees a beautiful house before him. Isshin says he once lived in this mansion, but it's now empty. Isshin tells Teppei to get some rest and leaves. Forgive me for not introducing myself. I'm Fujikura Yu, says the maid. Opening the door, Teppei sees a huge mansion with a throng of maids. Are all of you mine? Teppei asks. Welcome, say the maids. Teppei tells the maids to call him by his first name, not Master. The maid says it's unacceptable to call him by his first name. Master Teppei, the maids shout in unison. Teppei then walks through the house with the maid Yu, examining it. This is your quarters, says the maid Yu and opens the door. I'll be in the next room. Please ask me anything, says Yu. The maid Yu bids Teppei goodnight and Teppei thanks her. Teppei approaches the bed and lies down. Teppei recalls saving the beautiful Charlotte Heiserlink. He also recalls meeting the beautiful Silvia Van Hosen. He recalls how skillfully she handled a sword. Teppei recalls battling Silvia Van Hosen. Teppei then gets out of bed and calls the maid Yu on the phone. Teppei wants to talk to you about Silvia, his future bride. Teppei asks if it's normal for feelings to be put aside. Yu replies that grandfather cares for you and Silvia first and foremost. Silvia belongs to the noble family ruling the Felshich dukedom, Yu says. You can't marry someone you don't really know, says Teppei. Teppei says he felt lonely when he fenced with her. Teppei asks if he can refuse the marriage. Yu says that only you will make decisions in the future. Afterward, we see Silvia Van Hosen looking at the moon. A new day, Teppei wakes up surrounded by his maids. Teppei leaves the house and is met by the maids and his personal limousine. He gets into his personal limousine and drives away. Teppei says he needs to get somewhere by scooter. Yu says it's very dangerous. She can't risk Teppei like that. Teppei tells you that even a limousine can cause an accident. Teppei tells you to build him a safe scooter. He sees his new school through the window and is very surprised. This is Shuho High School where you transferred, Yu says. Teppei says he didn't think he'd end up at this rich school. Yu is confident that Teppei will quickly find his place in his new surroundings. Teppei doesn't understand why so many people have gathered around him. He says he's had enough and runs away. Yu opens his eyes, confused as to where Mr. Teppei has gone. We then see a girl getting off a carriage. Then we see Teppei running to a very beautiful dining room. Teppei accidentally bumps into a girl and falls to the floor. Sir, you need to be more careful, the girl says. The girl approaches Teppei, and their eyes meet. Your forehead is red, the girl says. Ms. Hojoin Seika is scolding you, says Seika's friend. It's your own fault, don't look around, says another friend. Seika asks Teppei if he's okay, and he replies, yes. She tells Teppei to take care of his appearance. Seika checks his collar and belt, and she says 80 out of 100. The friend says she can't even imagine who's standing in front of them. Seika says they've met for the first time and introduces herself. "See you again, newbie," says Miss Seika and leaves. Yu then finds Teppei and says she's been looking for him. Later, the principal and teachers greet Arima Teppei. Yu explains that his grandfather provides financial support to the school. Teppei enters the classroom and the students greet him with applause. Teppei comments that things are tough here. One of the students, Nizu Haruhiko, greets him. The other students run up to Teppei and introduce themselves. "It's my turn now," says one of the students. We see Charlotte Heiserlink spotting Teppei through the window. "I hope you won't forget me," says Nizu Haruhiko. "Guess who?" Charlotte says, covering Teppei's eyes with her palms. Charlotte presses her chest against his, and he immediately understands who it is. "If you can't guess, our meeting can't be called fate," she says. "Princess?" asks Teppei. "Do you remember?" replies Charlotte. Charlotte joyfully throws herself at Teppei, and they fall onto the desk. "Ouch," says Charlotte. "What's that, ouch?" replies Teppei. Later, we see Silvia walking down the hallway, thinking about marriage. Silvia Van Hosen opens the classroom door and sees Teppei and Charlotte. "How shameless," says Silvia and runs out of the classroom. Teppei asks Charlotte why they're frozen in that pose. Seika and her friends discuss Teppei Arima. "If I'd known he was Arima, I wouldn't have been so nice," says Seika. Seika says his name wouldn't make anyone tremble here. Charlotte tells Teppei about the social club owned by Seika. Teppei saw Silvia on the street and told her he was engaged to her. He tells Charlotte that Silvia must be shocked by what she saw. Teppei says it looked like he was pushing Charlotte around. "Maybe we should go make peace with her?" Charlotte asks Teppei Arima. Charlotte says she'll help Teppei get along with Silvia. Charlotte grabbed Teppei's hand and went to Silvia. Teppei saw Silvia wearing a mask and said her stance was giving her away. "Amazing," says Charlotte, seeing Silvia fighting. Teppei says she's like a different person. She moves much more briskly. He says she seems lonely here, unable to demonstrate her skills. Charlotte wants to match Teppei with Silvia, calling her, "Silvia, Teppei's challenging you to a duel," says Charlotte. Charlotte says that in a duel with him, the loneliness will vanish in an instant. Teppei said, "You look incredibly lonely," says Charlotte. "Hurry up, we'll have a duel," says Silvia, challenging Teppei to a fight. "Okay, let's continue yesterday's duel and find out who's better," says Teppei.
Mrs. Seika and her friends want to go watch Arima Teppei's fight. Afterwards we see Charlotte Hazelrink looking at Teppei and Silvia in surprise. Teppei and Silvia have a trial match in which Silvia wins very easily. Silvia says that such a victory will not satisfy her, that the rules only hinder them. Silvia Van Hosen offers to fight in her own style. Yu brings Teppei a sword. Charlotte asks if the sword is sharp. Teppei replies that it is wooden. The girl says that Silvia has become more cheerful. Teppei and Silvia are preparing for battle. Teppei tells Silvia not to accidentally prick him. Silvia says don't worry. Charlotte says she'll flip a coin and when it lands, the match begins. Seika notes that Teppei has an II stance, designed for just one powerful blow. Silvia remembers that Teppei had already used this striking technique last night. Charlotte flips a coin and the fight begins. They immediately attack each other. Silvia says it looks like a draw, but Teppei says Silvia won. Teppei says that he would have died if the fight had been real, since Silvia was faster than him. Teppei suggests that Silvia get to know him little by little, since she is his future wife. Silvia Van Hosen smiles and extends her hand to Teppei. Charlotte hugs them. Seika leaves and says that Teppei deserves a more humiliating defeat. Charlotte asks Teppei to show her the sword, then they fall down, Charlotte straddling him. Silvia tells Charlotte to get off him, but she starts jumping on him. Maid Yu looks at them with a smile, then Teppei and Maid Yu eat in the limousine. Teppei asks Yu about the social club, saying that Silvia recommended it. Fujikura Yu says that many famous students from the school are members of the social club. Teppei says that Charlotte and Silvia will act as his guarantors. Afterwards we see Teppei, Charlotte, and Silvia standing outside a social club. Teppei doesn't understand why such a huge building would be allocated for some club. Inside, one of the club members greets them and asks who this young man is. Charlotte says she wants him to join the club, after which Teppei introduces himself. Afterwards we see Nizu Haruhiko, Teppei's classmate, who is also a member of the club. He says that only a select few get into the club, then Seiki's friend pushes him. Seika doesn't understand what Arima Teppei is doing here and says that he is not allowed to enter. Silvia asks why they are so disgusted by Arima. They say that this is not true. Seika says that Silvia is simply groveling before him, knowing that he is Arima. Silvia replies that she is simply accompanying a friend of her father and nothing more. Seika calls Teppei impudent, saying that he forced them to vouch for him. Seika says that she is the head of the club and will not accept just anyone. Seika also notes that Teppei will only be able to join if he is well evaluated. Seika says that he should know his place. Just a couple of days ago he was the son of a merchant. Teppei screams that it is none of their business. Seika says not to raise his voice at them. Seika tells Teppei to get rid of his old manners and then come. Teppei says that he understands everything, he just needs to prove that he is on their level. Seika invites Teppei to the ball, and if he performs well, he will be accepted into the club. Teppei tells Seika to remember these words so that she doesn't wet herself later. Afterwards we see Nizu Haruhiko who is pressed against the wall and we are transported to the school. Teppei drinks tea while practicing etiquette, and Silvia says that he should drink silently. Teppei tries again and Charlotte tells him to speak normally. Then Teppei learns to walk correctly with books on his head. A new day begins. Seika Hojoin and her friends tell Arima Teppei not to yawn. Afterwards we see Charlotte teaching Teppei Arima how to dance properly. Teppei takes the opportunity to press himself against Charlotte's huge breasts. Charlotte tells Teppei that if he makes progress she will kiss him. Charlotte kisses Teppei and he starts to get embarrassed. Seika is also watching them. Next we see the maid Yu Fujikura bringing coffee to Teppei Arima. The maid Yu Fujikura approaches Arima Teppei's door and starts knocking on the door. The maid Yu Fujikura makes coffee for Arima Teppei and watches the process. She takes the kettle and pours coffee for Arima Teppei. The maid Yu Fujikura brings him a cup of coffee and apologizes for the long wait. Teppei says that he can't sleep because he has a lot to do. Teppei says that he has a lot to think about and suddenly remembers his past. Teppei remembered the moment when his parents were still alive and he studied until late. Teppei says that you reminded him of his mother. His mother brought him tea in the same way. Teppei is surprised how he ended up here at all, since he had other goals. Maid Yu Fujikura says that the main thing now is for him to find true friends. Yu says that she grew up in an orphanage owned by Teppei's grandfather, and he took her in. Grandfather told her that he did not require her to immediately achieve success in everything. The maid Yu Fujikura is extremely grateful to him, because now she can serve Teppei. The maid Yu Fujikura says that grandfather has high hopes for Teppei. Yu Fujikura just wants to be useful to someone, that's her meaning in life. Even if the benefit from it is very small, she will already be happy. Teppei thanks Yu Fujikura for such kind words and says that she is right. Then a new day begins and Teppei and his servant Yu Fujikura go to school. Seika stares at them again. Teppei and Charlotte try the dance again. Seika watches them and is surprised that Teppei is making any effort at all. Several students talk about Arima, then leave as soon as they notice Seika. Seika says she doesn't want to be mean. Charlotte notices the lump between Teppei's legs. Teppei says that he has some gum there. Silvia calls them to move on to tea. Teppei practices speaking beautifully, but Silvia notes that it is a bit rude. Silvia suggests that to perk up a bit with a change of scenery, they go fencing. Teppei and Silvia begin to praise each other, saying that they are something in fencing. Suddenly, maid Yu Fujikura shouts out and says that she has an idea. Yu suggests using martial arts etiquette, as Teppei is familiar with it. Silvia says that this could work and that you need to start training right away. Afterwards we see Teppei, Silvia and Charlotte standing in beautiful outfits outside the club. At the entrance they are met by Seika, who will test what Arima Teppei has learned. Seika says that he will try to judge fairly and invites them to come inside. Teppei, Charlotte and Silvia come inside. Teppei smiles at his maid Yu. Inside there are a lot of guests in beautiful outfits, and Teppei also meets Haruhiko. Seika welcomes all guests to the 151st Shuho Ball, wishing them a pleasant evening. A buffet was set for the ball guests and a school orchestra was also prepared. Teppei talks to the guests of the ball. Seika watches him a little displeased. Charlotte approaches Teppei and they want to show off their dance to the guests. Charlotte Hazelrink and Arima Teppei start dancing and all the guests look at them. Charlotte says that Teppei is doing a great job, noting that his hand is warm. "It was with this hand that you grabbed me that time and saved my life," Charlotte says. All the guests are delighted with this dance and say that the heir of Arima is a great fellow. It seems that Seika Hojoin falls in love with Arima Teppei and blushes in front of her friends. Hojoin Seika thanks everyone who came for participating in the ball she organized. Silvia Van Hosen says it remains to be seen what decision Hojoin will make. Seika says that Teppei did a great job with the short amount of time he spent. However, Hojoin Seika notes that Arima Teppei still has some work to do. Charlotte begins to stand up for him, saying that all the guests were pleased with him. Seika gives Teppei another task, to organize a meeting based on what he saw.
A meeting?
Should I organize a meeting like that? Teppei says in surprise.